where we're on a mission to redefine leadership for everyday life. If you think leadership is about board meetings and business attire, let me show you something different. I'm Sierra, your host, here to show you that leadership isn't just about titles or positions. It's actually about influence and impact wherever you are. We're creating a space where conversations about leadership are inclusive, insightful, and most importantly, impactful. Whether you're a stay-at-home parent or a corporate executive, our discussions are tailored to help you grow in influence and make a real impact. So let me tell you what you can expect in today's episode. This episode is called From Living Rooms to Boardrooms, Redefining Leadership for All Walks of Life. And today we will be diving into how every single interaction is an opportunity to expand your influence and grow your impact. But before we dig in, I'm sure you want to know a little bit more about your host, how this podcast came to be, and why you should stick around to listen to this full episode, as well as those to come. So let me start with the origin of branching out with Sierra. So what motivated me to start this podcast? You might actually be surprised by the reason for this. I was just chatting about it over breakfast this morning with Mark Kelly. Shout out to Mark of TWG Insurance. The biggest reason that I am doing this podcast is to do something that is very uncomfortable for me. I want to continue to push myself outside of my comfort zone while reaching more people with this message. So actually, I am terrified of having a podcast. I have been very stressed out leading up to the recording of this actual episode because if you know enough about me, you know that I am someone who likes to be extremely prepared. I may have a few perfectionist tendencies, and this puts me on the spot to just talk and be myself and not worry about every single thing that I'm going to say in advance. So this is definitely a perfect example of branching out, doing something that's not necessarily comfortable for me, but also allowing me to spread what I believe to be a very important message with my listeners. So let's talk about the name of the podcast. What is its significance? Well, obviously, it symbolizes growth, branching out into all areas of life. So if you didn't know this about me, I am the owner of Sierra Learnership Collaborative, oftentimes called SLC because it is a mouthful. And within Sierra Learnership Collaborative, I do leadership development, coaching, speaking, and training. And just so you understand a little bit about how branching out is associated with my business itself, if you've seen both of the logos, both of them are trees. There is a Celtic feel to both because I actually, my family is from Ireland. So my great-great-grandfather came to Winchester, Virginia, where I am recording this episode today, and built the first Collins family home in America, right on Loudon Street in Winchester, so right downtown in Winchester. And my Celtic, my Irish background has kind of been a big part of me, and so I wanted to incorporate that. So most people ask me when they see my logo, so what is the Celtic piece about? So we are Irish, the Collins family is Irish, and then also the tree. The tree represents growth. I like to think that the things that I do are very rooted in purpose, very clear in my purpose. Actually, as I'm saying this, I do believe I have a sign behind me on the wall all about purpose. It says live with purpose, actually. And I like to think that the tree with the branches represent in Sierra Learnership Collaborative the three different areas of my business: coaching, speaking, and training. But for the branching outside, they represent all of the areas that I feel make up our life as a whole. So I want to explain what I mean by that. If you've heard of a Wheel of Life before, you may have, you may not. It is basically a pie. If you think of a pie, visualize broken up into sections. For me, the Wheel of Life I created for my business and I have modified over time was actually a cross section of a tree, believe it or not, goes along with my tree theme. And it's broken up into 8 different areas of life that are represented. So I'm not just talking about work and then home life. I am talking about, for example, your health. Your health is made up with your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health. So it's a very big category of the Wheel of Life. That's one of 8 categories. So when I think about growth, I don't just think about professional development as one category and personal growth as one. I like to really think about how I can intentionally look at my Wheel of Life, see what areas my wheel is not able to roll in, and then create goals that align with those specific areas. So going back to the title, branching out, I think that it helps us to see the value in branching out to try new things, seeking growth in all sorts of different areas. It helps me to connect with looking at something in a new way, a new perspective, and then looking back at that Wheel of Life, not just breaking life into 2 categories of work and home. So that's what branching out means to me. I think we'll be branching out in a lot of the different topics that we cover of all sorts of different personal and professional growth areas. So you never know what you might hear on an episode. So I want to dig into a little bit, just a little bit, of my personal journey into leadership. Why leadership? Why this podcast? So I want to define a couple of key moments that really stand out to me on this journey to help you understand what led me to the point of sitting in this room recording this today. So one thing you should know about me is I have always valued learning. I have always valued education and achievement. I was, very dedicated student at school, sat in the front row, teacher's pet. Those of you that know me aren't surprised by any of this. So I always knew I wanted to be in education. So just to kind of give you an idea so that you can picture this, I was born in Winchester, Virginia, because that was the closest city to where I was actually raised, which was in Hampshire County, West Virginia. So about 30 minutes west of Winchester in West Virginia, and went through Hampshire County schools and knew exactly what I wanted to do. I always had wanted to be a teacher. So I can even remember sitting at my grandparents' house in Winchester, sitting on the floor, giving my grandfather a spelling test, pulling out my red pens. I associated errors with red pens already as a small child, and grading my grandfather's test. So I always found joy in being able to educate, test, and see how much someone had learned and grown by working alongside of me. So with that background, by the way, I did entertain for 1 year the thought of becoming a nurse and helping people in that capacity. And all it took was 1 class in high school and looking at some needles to realize that was not the route for me. So back to education. When I graduated from high school, I graduated a little bit earlier. I graduated at the age of 16. I went to Shepherd the first year. So it was Shepherd College. Now it's Shepherd University in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. Just did a year there closer to home before I transferred to West Virginia University, where I did a 5-year master's program in education. So I knocked out bachelor's and master's all at once. And when I went into education, I knew I wanted to impact as many students as I could. I was very happy when I landed my first teaching job before I graduated. I reached out to a school in Fairfax County, Virginia, and it was the first school I interviewed with. I got in the early hire period, super excited to get in the classroom, but also excited to go into my summer knowing what I could expect, what lied ahead for me. So I started that first year. I came in, I was young. There were very well-seasoned teachers all around me. But very quickly, I started taking on leadership positions. I realized that I was able to have greater impact to more students, specifically, if I worked with more teachers. Because I did not just want to provide an education to the students in my classroom, I wanted to reach far beyond that. So since I wanted to expand my influence and my impact, I started leading more professional development. So it started at the school level, then I started to do more professional development at the district level. And it just seemed to be this desire I had to always want to take things to the next level, always be taking classes, getting new certifications, trying to figure out what could come next to allow me to grow to the next level. And if I wanted to impact more educators, I knew I needed to move into leadership. And based on my definition of leadership at that time, moving into leadership meant I wanted to move into a principalship. I wanted to move into an administrative leadership role, and ultimately I saw myself as the superintendent of schools in some capacity someday. That is what I had my sights set on. Well, without going into a lot of detail, there were some life events that occurred, some health challenges that I faced that landed me on bed rest. To improve my quality of life and focus on my health, I decided to teach in Winchester, Virginia for a couple of years. And during that time, I started pursuing an educational leadership program at James Madison University. It was wonderful to be able to continue to teach during the day, had wonderful professors in the evening, and I was pursuing that so I could move into principalship. Well, that didn't exactly go as planned either because of those health challenges again. I ended up on bed rest for a second time, and it forced me to pivot. That is a story for another day. There are plenty of different topics that we can cover in relation to that side of my life. But what I want you to hear is that moment that I shifted from a focus on educational leadership to just leadership as a whole. So imagine this, I'm on bed rest and I feel as if everything that I have worked for my entire life up until that point, I was going to have to leave behind. And I thought that all of the years as an educator, being told that I could no longer pursue that with my health challenges, that it was going to go to waste, my degree was going to go to waste, and I had no idea what the future would hold for me. So I received an email from a friend, someone who I had gotten close to, and he had shared with me that he saw my passion for helping people to grow, and he wanted to introduce me to something that he thought was going to help give me freedom and control to really establish my own schedule and take care of my health while also doing something I was passionate about. So at that time, I first heard about John Maxwell. And if you do not know John Maxwell, this was the first time I was exposed to him as well. If you do a simple Google search, you will quickly find out he is the #1 leadership guru in the world. And I'm not just saying that. He's written over 100 books in his lifetime. He has a training program that he uses to do what he says is he trains and certifies the legs for his legacy. So he has trained many different leadership development coaches, speakers, and trainers all over the world to continue to go out and do the work that he was doing so that one day when he is no longer here, he can still continue to have impact. So why is he so important to this story? Well, I was introduced to him and his training program, certification program, and it was at that moment that I decided I was going to pursue that. I was going to get my certification. So as soon as I was off of bed rest and I could go back to whatever normal would be for me at that point, I was going to launch my business as a leadership development coach, speaker, and trainer. So if you can imagine me laying in bed, I suddenly had a purpose again. I was going to spend every moment that I could watching training videos, reading John Maxwell's books, getting all of the information I needed, and doing all the exercises I needed to feel confident in the new direction I was moving. Because up until this point, remember, everything was all about achievement and learning more and, getting a good grade on a test. That was kind of my obsession. So this for me was, I need to learn everything I can so I can be a legitimate coach at the end of this. Well, one of the messages that stood out to me immediately that John Maxwell shared is his definition of leadership. You can read it all over the place. If you Google it, you can find it. It's in his books. It's in every training he did. John says that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. So think about that for a second. Leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And at that moment, I stopped and I thought, wait a minute. But I've been influencing people. Does that make me a leader? And it made me start reflecting on something that I had never really spent a lot of time reflecting on. Because remember, I wanted to move into leadership. I was going through a program to move into leadership. And now you're telling me that leadership is about influence. And I started to think about the fact that I had been influencing people for a long time. All right, so let's pause right there, and I want to talk about the definition of leadership. So in preparation for today's episode, I actually looked up the definition of leadership. I Googled it. I did not scroll through and look for a specific one. I chose the first thing that came up, which was actually Cambridge Dictionary, which said that leadership is the person or people in charge of an organization. A leader, then, which I also looked up and had two definitions, is a person who manages or controls other people, especially because his or her ability or position. The second definition being, a leader is a person in charge of a group, a country, or a situation. So when I read these, this helped me to see I had this traditional view of leadership all my life. And I felt that we needed to consider what John Maxwell had to say, to think of a more inclusive approach to leadership. Because do you really, listen to those key words, do you have to be in charge to be a leader? Do you have to manage other people? Does leadership have to do with control, a desire for control? Does it have to be based on someone's ability or someone's title or position? Something doesn't match up. So, when I started this show, I said to you that I'm on a mission to redefine leadership for everyday life. That's because I think that there is a need for a much broader, more inclusive definition. I want to give you an example of how I know that this is true. I am out and about, always networking, meeting lots of new people. Obviously, I'm the face of my business, so that requires a lot of relationship building. I do a lot with the local chamber. And when I meet someone new and they ask what I do, I wish you could see their faces when I say leadership development. I want you to visualize this. You probably are having a reaction of your own based on your definition of leadership. And I'll let you imagine this. I think I'm pretty darn good at reading people And I can tell you that the majority of people disengage when I say leadership development. And the pattern that I think I have discovered in this is that unless a person already sees themselves as a leader, or they see themselves as someone who is constantly working and striving to grow into a leadership role, it doesn't seem to be a topic of interest. It might even seem out of reach for a lot of people. Another example of this is I do a lot of work with effective communication. So I do a lot of DISC trainings, and it's one of the most common questions that I'm asked when we're talking about one area of DISC that relates to how outgoing or reserved you might be. When someone is pegged in the group as an introvert, they will ask, does that mean I can never be a leader? And that question now blows my mind too, because of course that isn't true. And you may not know this about me, but I'm actually extremely introverted, and I have a very limited social battery, and it drains very quickly. Does that mean that I cannot be an effective leader? I would like to think that that is not true at all. I think all of this goes back to the definitions that I read to you earlier. People connect leadership with positions of power and authority within an organization. But if we replace the word leadership with influence, or even the word impact, I want to see how that changes things. Because when I tell people what I do, most people aren't thinking about their influence or their impact, whether it's in their family, their community, their organizations within their community, sports, their church, and beyond. Are they thinking about, when I say leadership development, are they thinking about their impact, their influence? So they must be a leader. No, they are probably thinking of their profession and the role they currently hold. And that's exactly what I am on a mission to change through this podcast. I was a leader as a daycare provider when I first graduated from high school during the summers. I was a leader. I was a leader as a McDonald's employee, which I have plenty of fun stories to tell you about, and I found extreme value in that experience, by the way. Did not love my parents at the time for sending me to work at McDonald's, but today I do credit McDonald's to my ability to speak to people out in public, and I have greater emotional intelligence because of that experience. I was a leader when I was simply an intern at a school. I didn't have my teacher certification yet. I was just an intern, and I'll come back to that in a second. I was a leader as a teacher, and the list goes on and on. This is the thing that I have come to learn in just the past few years. If you would have asked me 4 years ago if I had ever been a leader, the only way that I would have said I was a leader is if I was told I was a team lead within a school, because it was my title. By the way, the just piece, which I want to come back to during another episode, is I used to always say when people asked me what I did, I was just a teacher. And that's why I used that as an example a minute ago, just an intern. I was just a teacher, and I've really worked hard to overcome that, because we are not just anything. And that's something I'm passionate about. So actually, every single interaction that I have with someone is an opportunity for me to impact or influence the people around me. Sometimes this does get me into a little bit of trouble, to be completely honest. As a former teacher, if you're a teacher or have been one in the past, you understand this. Once a teacher, always a teacher. I find myself trying to educate some people that maybe don't care to hear or see the lesson. But that doesn't really stop me from looking for opportunities to do so. So, what I hope that you're taking away so far in this episode is that leadership is for everyone. I want to emphasize that it's not limited to those with titles, with authority in certain positions within an organization. I want to give you a real life example to help you see what everyday leadership can look like. And I want you to stick with me for this story. So, if you don't know this, I have an addiction. I've had it for a while now, and that addiction is Dunkin' Donuts. I love Dunkin' Donuts coffee. I have chosen to wean myself off of it in the past. I focused one entire quarter of a year on weaning myself off of it and not getting any Dunkin'. And as soon as the quarter was over, I celebrated my success with a Dunkin' Donuts coffee. And guess what? That one coffee, I was right back into it. And what I find with Dunkin' is it's a great part of my morning routine. I spend a lot of time on the road, and it is just a great pick-me-up, something to drink on the way down the road. But how does Dunkin' fit into leadership in everyday life? Well, I happen to think that the Dunkin' that I am a regular at is the absolute most efficient Dunkin' Donuts ever. I typically order from my app from my driveway. I'm about 3 minutes away from the Dunkin', so that I can pull into that parking lot, pull right up to the window, share that I already placed my mobile order, and they'll tell me to pull around. And I am telling you that this Dunkin' Donuts in Pennsylvania is amazing. They keep the line going, and they are a busy Dunkin' Donuts. So they even created a second lane that people don't know how to use, by the way. That's always entertaining to help, see people navigate. When do I zipper into this line? But anyway, I have found that even when there's 2 lanes of traffic, they will keep the line moving, handing things out the window. It's efficient. It's amazing. But let's talk about when I go to a different Dunkin' Donuts, or when there is a different employee or team member at the window that maybe isn't as experienced. How do I handle that? Well, that's a great question, because I admit that I am an extremely impatient person. I like to be efficient in everything that I do. I always try to save time. I have every moment of my day scheduled out. I have my morning routine scheduled out. And I know I have to be at the office to start my morning ritual, my workday startup ritual at 7:30. So if that line is not moving the way that I expected it to, I have a short buffer, but there is a possibility that I'm going to be late for my ritual, and that's not good. But I realized one day when I was sitting in that line, it was extremely long, there was no way for me to abandon my order because I had already ordered and paid for it, because remember, I'm efficient and I do it on my app. So I was going to sit in line no matter how long it took so I could wait for my coffee. So I had plenty of time to think about how I was going to handle this. And maybe this is the empathetic side of me. I was thinking about the person that must be up in the window and the level of stress that they might have been feeling as they could see that, on the cameras outside, traffic backing up, all of these people waiting. And I thought to myself, what can I do during my interaction with this individual? I have a short amount of time to have a positive influence or positive impact on that team member and on their day. So I'll tell you what I did. When I pulled up to that window, I suddenly felt a great amount of control because I knew none of the vehicles behind me could move until I moved. So I was going to slow things down for a minute for that team member. This happened to me just last week. It's not the first time it's happened. It's not going to be the last time. But when I pulled up to that window, I paused. And I could see immediately on this young lady's face that she was extremely stressed out. She was looking around, not sure where the next order was. And I knew that there were probably some very impatient people that had been in front of me that might not have been extremely respectful. So when she handed me the order, asked me my name, handed me the order, I told her, "You're doing a great job. Let's just pause for a second. Just take a second and breathe. You're doing great." And I gave her the space to just take the moment that she needed to reset. And I will tell you that the look on her face, at first she was shocked, but she was so very grateful. There was this relief that I could see on her face. She paused. She took a deep breath with me. We sat there together having this moment, right? And I knew the people behind me hated me in that moment, but I loved every second of it. And I knew that I had impacted her day. I took advantage of that opportunity. That right there was an opportunity to have a positive influence on someone. That took place in a Dunkin' Donuts drive-thru. So when I say that we can apply leadership principles, that we can influence and impact people in our everyday lives, this is just one simple example in a drive-thru. This applies to every opportunity that you have to interact with another human being. So whether this is a neighbor, someone that you know is spending a lot of time alone, you take them a treat and show them that you've been thinking about them. Whether it's a child at the park, doesn't have anyone playing with them, whoever it may be, stop and think about, what opportunity do I have in front of me today to have a positive influence on this person? What I hope that you gain by listening to this is realizing that you have plenty of opportunities to influence, whether you are someone that is a stay-at-home parent at this time, raising your children, and you are instilling values in your children on a regular basis. You are modeling for them how to interact with people that you've never met before out in a public setting, right? So imagine my Dunkin' Donuts drive-thru scenario with a child in the back seat that is able to witness how that was handled and how I was able to have a positive influence, right? We are always able to do this. So I want to introduce each episode some sort of leadership challenge for you to be able to implement the thing that I'm talking about in the episode. So let's talk about what that will be for this first episode. From living rooms to boardrooms, redefining leadership for all walks of life. Okay? What I meant by that was, whether you are folding a load of laundry in the living room and the laundry is all wrinkled, it's been sitting in the basket for 2 weeks and you're finally getting to it and your children are sitting in there having a snack, what can you do to have a positive influence right there from your living room to the boardroom where you are serving on an executive board for a nonprofit that you are passionate about? What does it look like to lead in all of those different settings? I want you to see that we can redefine leadership in a way that this podcast is truly accessible for anyone. That every single person that listens will be able to take a simple leadership concept that we've discussed and apply it in their daily lives and hopefully share their experiences. So this week's branching out challenge is, I really want you to focus in on and bring awareness to the people you currently influence. Some of us might be listening to this while we're on the road. Maybe you're listening to it in the shower, whenever you have the opportunity to. If you are someone that can just, reflect on this, you can just brainstorm. That's fine. If you are someone that really wants to take this to the next level, set aside a few minutes and sit down with a piece of paper and a pencil and write down a list of people you feel in your life you are currently influencing. Even if you just look at one day in your life. I think of, okay, it's 3:30 p.m. How many people have I spoken to today? How many people have I communicated with, even with my nonverbal language, right? My nonverbal cues. All of these people I influenced in some way because it had an impact on their behavior, their response, their character, whatever it may be. Then I want you to think about, well, what type of influence do you have on those people? And what I mean by that is it a positive one where you are adding value after the interaction with this individual? You walk away, you have in some capacity filled their cup. Or do you find yourself, when you are influencing others, to be someone that has drained it? Someone that has negatively impacted them. Maybe you dumped everything that's going on in your life that you're stressed out about right now on this person, and they walked away feeling heavier and feeling the weight on their shoulders, and you walked away a little bit more free. What type of influence did you have on that person? And finally, how can you be more intentional about having a positive impact on the people around you? So there are 3 parts here. We want to bring awareness to the people you currently influence. You can go as narrow as in one given day. You can go as broad as these are people I typically interact with. Number 2 is, what type of influence do you find yourself having on these people? Are you adding value? Are you filling the cup? Or are you draining them in some way? And finally, how can you be more intentional about having a positive impact? I love intentionality. I like to think that I am very intentional in the way in which I choose to do things. And so you might hear me use that word intentional in a lot of future episodes. So that is my challenge for you in relation to what I'm speaking about today. So what I want you to do once you've reflected on those things is I want you to engage in these podcasts. I want you to submit responses to me. I want to hear from you and how you're connecting. If there is an aha moment that you have based on something that you've heard, please, please, please share that with us. I want to hear how it's connecting with the listeners. So before we talk about how we can connect with one another, I want to summarize what I hope you're taking away from today's episode. Every interaction is an opportunity to have an impact. And as we continue to discuss areas of personal and professional growth, I want you to remember that no matter where you are in your leadership journey, even if you aren't 100% convinced yet that you are a leader, notice I said yet because I will convince you. I'm confident in that. These will apply to you. All of the leadership principles that are discussed will apply to you no matter where you are on your journey. And I would love for you to be able to share your takeaways with others as well. So that's what we've discussed today. No matter whether you're listening from your living room or you're on your way to that boardroom, let's work together to redefine leadership. If you would like to share what you have learned today or your feedback to this week's challenge, I would love to hear from you by reaching out to info@branchingoutpodcast.com. Shoot us an email. It's a quick, easy way to let us know what you're taking away from the episode. And if you're following through with those challenges, we will definitely be in touch. Another way that you can engage throughout this journey and make sure you're not missing any episodes is you can subscribe on your favorite platform. You can check us out on Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and more. So we keep adding additional options. And finally, I want to make sure you visit us at branchingoutpodcast.com. There is a spot on there where we have a contact form. You can let us know if you have questions that you would like us to cover in an episode. You can let us know if there is a topic that you would like us to cover in an episode. It will not always be me riding solo on these episodes. I plan on having guests sharing in these conversations with me. We'll have plenty of inspirational stories and practical tips for you. So there is also a place on the branchingoutpodcast.com website for you to submit an application to be a guest if that is of interest to you. And I will not be choosing those that will appear on with me. I have a team of folks that will be helping me with that. So take the time to fill out the application if you're interested, and someone will be in touch. So I am so grateful that you took time out of your day, out of your busy schedule. And believe me, I know you're busy. We're all busy, and we have a limited amount of time in our day. You took time to listen in today, and that tells me a lot about you, actually. It tells me either you're already a Sierra supporter, and for that, I am very grateful. Or maybe you heard about this podcast and you're ready to grow as a leader, whether you already define yourself as a leader or you are someone that's trying to work towards that and growing personally and professionally. You took time for your growth today. I hope that you have found value and that you choose to come back for more. In the meantime, please share this episode with those in your life that you feel need a reminder of the impact that they are already having on the lives of people around them on a regular basis. So as you are reflecting on those you're influencing, share with others that have influenced you. So if you know of someone who's had a really positive influence on your life, positive impact on your life that has led you in some capacity, let them know. Let them know that you appreciate that and you are aware of that. So my final thought for you today is I really hope you are inspired to see yourself as a leader in your own right, wherever you are. I look forward to talking to you in future episodes. I look forward to hearing from you on social media, on the website, email, and through your subscriptions. Until next time, friends, keep branching out. See you soon.